All right, I think I'm live. Hi, everybody. This is Mina Badros, licensed real estate broker, licensed real estate instructor. I wanted to go live and just shed some light on really what's going on with this NAR settlement, more so on what it means for people on the ground, the buyers, the sellers, the agents who are actually doing the work. So I'm not really going to go into what the settlement details are. I think that's the news that dropped on Friday, and everybody can read that. Really, what I want to go into, as I said, is what does it really mean for the people on the ground? What do people do now? So I'm going to cover things like what legal requirements and changes will be in effect come July or mid July, how buyers and sellers will be impacted by this, what agents will need to do as a result of this, and how can agents position themselves in the market to provide a valuable and compensated service to their real estate clients? I'm also going to touch on PA specific forms and procedures and answer some questions along the way. This is going to be short um, and concise as I usually do. You know, I like to get to the point and make it clear and not prolong things. And I am also going to have more trainings, so there's going to be a class on Tuesday that breaks this farther down, and we'll go through how to navigate this as an agent. But for right now, I just wanted to get some clarity in front of you. So, what is changing? Coming July 2024, starting mid July 2024, one of the big changes is that there's going to be no offer of buyer broker compensation in the MLS. What does that mean? So, right now, MLSs have a field buyer agency commission, right, or buyer agency compensation. Is essentially the amount of money that the listing broker is giving to the buyer broker for co-brokering that deal. As of mid-July, there will be no field. We're not going to allow to post on the MLS any offer of compensation to buyers agents. Okay, so no offer of compensation to buyers agents in the MLS come mid-July. All right. Um, Now, can buyers agents still get compensated from the listing broker or from the seller side? Yes, they still can. It just cannot be listed in the MLS. It can be listed on a private website of that broker. It can be negotiated as seller's concessions in the offer, right? So, one of the things that sellers will be able to do is provide concessions, right? Or seller's assist or seller's credit. People call them different things in different markets. And those concessions can go towards the closing costs of the buyer, including the buyer agent commission that the buyer would be responsible for, right? There's already a few options as to how compensation can work in absence of buyer compensation posted on the MLS. There's a few options here, but if you come to the Tuesday class, we'll dive more into the other options. So that's one big change. Another big change is that agents may not offer their services as free. Okay. Also in the top right, buyer brokers need to negotiate their fee and services prior to a showing. So why I said these two kind of together, because right now a lot of buyers would contact an agent, and that agent would give them a consultation or might set up appointments to go show property, go out and show properties, write offers, all of that without having a buyer agency agreement in place. So there is no representation agreement between that buyer and that buyer broker. Moving forward, before the buyer broker renders any services like showing a property, they have to sit down and explain their fees to the buyer, right? So more than likely what's going to happen is that before a buyer agent serves a buyer, there's going to have to be a buyer agency agreement in place between that buyer and that buyer agent, and it's going to spell out how that buyer agent is going to be paid and what that buyer is going to be responsible for. Okay. The last thing here on the screen, bottom right, is there is no unilateral offer of compensation. What does that mean? So if I'm a listing agent right now and I list a home on the MLS, I'm putting in there a buyer agency commission, that whatever buyer agent comes with a buyer and we close a deal, they're going to get this commission, right? So we're not really negotiating it at that point in most cases. In some cases, we do. But most people aren't really negotiating it, right? They're just kind of taking what's in the MLS and that's what they're putting in the deal. Um, and as a listing agent, I'm not saying that I'm going to give more or less because someone's going to do more work or less work, that someone's going to bring a better offer versus someone who's not. It's a blanket offer of compensation. It's a unilateral, unconditional offer of compensation, and that will go away, meaning that sellers may negotiate compensation on a buyer to buyer or offer to offer case. All right. So again, big changes coming in July. There's not going to be buyer agent commission listed in the MLS. It can be listed privately elsewhere, and it can still be done, just not listed on the MLS. Buyers agents or agents in general may not offer their services as quote unquote free. And for buyers agents to be able to render services to a buyer, they need to have an agreement in place prior to doing that, right? And last thing, there is no unilateral offer of compensation. It's very important to note that there's more changes coming, right? I know a lot of people want all the answers right now and how will this all play out? We know what we know, which are some of the things I just shared with you, and I'll continue to share with you. But there are updates coming, right? And there might be some more changes coming. We're gonna see PAR, Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, already announced that they're going to review and possibly update the forms, the PAR forms necessary to make sure everything is in compliance with this NAR settlement. Pennsylvania has a pretty good handle on forms. It's a great thing that we have standard forms. We already have all the options built in. And I'm going to share that with you in a later slide, but there might be some updates to the forms that you use from the state, like PAR, like the PAR forms that we use, and also forms from your brokerages. Your brokerage may now create additional disclosures or additional forms that buyers and sellers have to review and sign prior to you serving them. We will definitely see some updates and changes to the MLS. You know, one of the big things we said is compensation for buyer agents are being removed off the MLS. We might see some more changes to the MLS to make everything work. We're going to see updates and changes to policies and procedures. Almost every brokerage out there right now, especially all the big brokerages, they're getting together and they're figuring out what do they need to change, what do they need to add, right, to make sure that they are well protected, to make sure that the consumer and their client is going to be well served, and to make sure that their agents are also going to be well served and compensated. So expect policies and procedure changes from brokerages out there, including yours. Also, there might be updates to other laws and programs impacted by this. Just one example, VA, right? VA loans, one requirement is that VA commission on VA deals has to be paid through the listing broker. Well, if that's not happening, then obviously something has to get fixed on that end, right? So right now, if I'm a buyer's agent and I have a buyer who's getting a VA loan, I cannot ask for compensation from my buyer themselves. I have to get my compensation from the listing broker. Or if I can't do that, what happens with my VA clients? That's one example, but there will be other things that change to make essentially all the pieces of the puzzle fit together. So expect changes to the forms from the state level, from your broker. Expect MLS updates and changes. Expect updates to policies and procedures in office, and also updates to other laws and programs. I will say also, nothing changes until it changes. Okay, so the MLS change is going to happen mid-July. So that's kind of when the big change is going to happen, mid-July, and then I think a lot of other changes will follow. But maybe your broker will institute something beginning tomorrow, right? As of now, business is still being done as it is, right? And nothing changes until it changes, okay? So what does it mean to sellers? What does it mean to buyers? Just a few key points. So for sellers, If I'm selling my home, I should know that um, when I list the property in the MLS, or when I have a listing broker list this property in the MLS, I'm no longer going to be able to offer a compensation to the agent bringing in the buyer, right? Which is a way to incentivize and compensate agents for their value, their hard work, and for bringing in the buyer and for co-oping that deal. I'll no longer be able to do that. But I can offer compensation off of the MLS, right? I can also offer concessions in the contract for closing costs that would go towards the buyer's closing cost, including maybe some of their agent commission. Okay. So as a seller, I know that no MLS, the buyer agent commission is not going to be in the MLS. I can offer it, but outside the MLS, right? And I can negotiate concessions in the contract, in the offer, that would go to the buyer's closing cost and would include their agent compensation. Know this, as a seller, commission is always negotiable. It always has been, and I don't see it changing. Commission is always negotiable, and you have options. You currently have options before even this change goes down, and you will have options after this change goes down mid-July. So as a seller, you should ask your listing agent, what options do I have? Or even better yet, what are all my options when it comes to compensation, when it comes to paying you, the listing broker, when it comes to paying or not paying the buyer agent, right? And allow your listing broker to disclose to you all the options available, and you then decide. For buyers, if I am buying, here are a few things I should know. I should know that my agent is not, if I have an agent that's representing me, there is no offer of compensation out there for them that's a blanket in the MLS, right? Um, I should know that if I'm going to work with an agent, I will now sign a buyer representation agreement before they serve me. Almost every business, every place of service you go to, you have to pay for your services, right? And real estate is not going to be any different. So as a buyer who's looking to get the representation of a buyer's agent, I will be signing a contract before these services are rendered. I can pay the commission to my own agent, right? There's nothing that stops the buyers from paying the commission themselves. That's always been an option, and that will continue to be an option. Also, the buyer can negotiate or can request seller concessions from the seller that would cover the compensation of their agent. So also buyers have options. So again, for buyers, know that you'll probably be signing an agreement, a representation agreement with your agent, okay? That you'll be speaking with your agent about compensation, and they're probably gonna tell you, here's what we expect to charge. And one option is you as a buyer paying that commission, but also there are other options, and one of them is negotiating or requesting concessions from the seller to cover your commissions, right? There are other options, so definitely get with me or get with your agent and explore those options, right? What can agents do? So let's move on to the agent side. We'll cover this from the buy side and then the sell side, and then kind of a generic what to do overall. So if you are working with buyers, you really need to examine your buyer strategy session or your buyer counseling session. And if you don't have one, get one. Excuse me. As a buyer's agent, you need to really articulate your value to the buyer. Essentially, demonstrate to the buyer why should they pay for your services, right? What is the value that you bring to the buyer? What is the benefit that they have to get by working with you? And why should they pay for you to represent them? Okay, so learning to articulate your value is very, very critical. The second thing is learning the buyer agency agreement, right? If you don't already know it like the back of your hands, begin to look at it, right? Understand the buyer agency agreement, know how to explain it to clients, know how to break down the compensation section, know how to talk through it. Know all the options you can give to buyers for that. Okay. So be very good when it comes to your contracts forms, particularly your buyer agency agreement. Another point is knowing how to navigate compensation options for buyers, right? What are all the options? And I stress the word all, right? A lot of realtors are used to doing things one way. And although there are other options, they never had to resort to those other options because that's not how people do business in their market, right? But you, as a savvy professional, have to learn of all the different options that are available for your buyers and your sellers so that you can direct them accordingly and also stay out of trouble, right? By not disclosing something and taking on more risk to yourself. Another big thing that I think Asians have to sharpen their tools on is negotiating, right? Negotiating with if you're a buyer agent, negotiating with the listing broker about that compensation, and overall be ready to change. One thing I didn't mention in the very beginning: there's a lot of people who are fearful because of this. There's also a lot of people who think that there's an opportunity because of this. I definitely understand the concerns and the fears, but I'm personally optimistic. I'm looking at the opportunity, so I can see both sides of things. I think there are definitely valid concerns of people, valid things that maybe could go wrong in their life that people are concerned about. That's all very very valid, and I also do think that there is opportunity. Here's something I learned years ago, early in my corporate days at work. Um, a senior vice president used to say, "Take news as is, never bad or good, just is, and see how to move forward." And I think this is a very applicable situation to do that, right? We got hit with news on Friday. We just got to take the news as is and see how to move forward. Yes, there's going to be people who fear. There's going to be people who are happy about it. We got to look at the facts. We got to look forward and stay clear, right? Think about how you meet with your first time with the buyers for the first time, right? Think about the list of services that you offer. Do you have your list of services clearly explained, possibly on your website or social media, or do you have a list of services, even written down? And if not, think about everything that you do and all the services that you provide. Uh, Maybe unbundling your services will become a practice or a route that you choose to take, right? Depending on how everything unfolds. On the seller side, what can agents do? So the big thing is really being able to explain how compensation works to your seller and showing them their options. If you're a Pennsylvania agent like myself and you're using the PAR forms, it already breaks down in there what is the total commission, what is the commission that's going to be paid to a buyer agent, sub agent, transactional licensee, if there's going to be a dual variable commission. All of that is kind of broken down. So just being able to explain and articulate to seller clients how the compensation works and what are their options, and also the pros and cons with their options. So are they required to pay a buyer agent? No, they're not. They never were, actually, right? Um, so what does that change? What does that mean? What are the pros and cons when it comes to that? Okay, cool. A lot of MLSs are having seller concessions. We mentioned that seller concessions may be one practice that a lot of people resort to, where the buyer receives seller concessions and towards their closing cost, and some of those closing costs will happen to be the buyer agent commission, right? So make sure you're discussing concessions with your seller, right? How are concessions going to work? If they are prepared to offer concessions, what does that look like? So making sure you're discussing that at the listing appointment or in your consultation appointment prior to taking the listing. Right? Excuse me. Also discussing dual variable rate or dual rate commission or variable rate commission, right? How will that work? What does that look like? And obviously commission is negotiable. So what those numbers look like are between you, the listing agent or your broker, and the seller, okay? Also on the selling side, you want to update your listing packet and the menu of services that you provide for the sellers, and possibly fees for those services, whether it's a whole bundled fee or an unbundled fee for each of the services that you provide. I think we're going to see a lot of different ideas, different options, different practices that are out there, right? People are going to try to see what's going to work in the market moving forward. What will the market accept in lieu of these changes? And we'll probably end up with a few common practices in the market, right? But all the options are already out there, or most options are already out there until we create new ones. But even with all the options, most people only resort to a few. Okay. In general, what should agents do? Very big thing is being able to articulate your value to the client. What value do you provide? What services do you provide? Why should someone pay you for these services? Right? So you want to become an expert. And you really want to become an expert on the forms, on contracts, being able to really navigate the buyer agency agreement with buyers, being able to really explain the listing agreement with sellers and break those things down, right? Having a very strong counseling session or consultation session or strategy session, whatever you want to call it, okay? Having a very strong counseling session or listing appointment or buyer appointment, followed by a very great process in place, right? So you have to fine tune the things that you're doing so that you can be more effective. Get yourself very aware of all the different compensation options, right? If there is no co-op, what else can be done? What are all the options out there that are legal and ethical? I'm teaching a class. I'm actually in the middle of teaching a class. I'm on break right now, but um, you know, with one of the code of ethics things is that anything that's legal and ethical when it comes to compensation and business practices is not prohibited. So even though no one else is doing it in your market and people are saying that's not how we do business, you shouldn't do that. This is the way we've done business for X amount of years. As long as it's legal, as long as it's ethical, as long as it's compliant with your company policy, you can be innovative, you can be creative, you can do all of these things, right? Commission is negotiable. Whatever you and your client agree to, that's legal, that's ethical, that's compliant, right? Even if other people don't like it, that's okay, right? So get really good with understanding all the different compensation options. Negotiating is definitely a skill that you have to sharpen, right? Because you're going to be negotiating maybe with your clients, right? Which you still are, but you're going to negotiate even more with your clients. And you might have to negotiate compensation and commission with the other side more often than you have been doing, right? So really being able to understand and navigate compensation options for buyers and sellers, being able to negotiate these compensation options, being able to get creative as far as deal structure is concerned, and what can we do in this situation? How else can we serve everyone and get this to the closing line while still everybody gets compensated? How does that all work, right? And a big thing is learn. I actually, when I was putting this together, I put learn, right? But then I added a few more things in there. You definitely want to learn, right? And be open to change and stay plugged in and updated. As I said, there's going to be a lot more changes coming. Okay. There's going to be a lot of things that we have to sort through and work through. And there may be new ways of doing business that you have to learn. So there's going to be updates coming from, your MLS, your office, your state. You definitely have to be aware of all of those. You definitely have to be compliant. You have to learn new ways or better ways of doing business and be open to the fact that things will change. Few resources. There's already a lot of classes. I teach a few. There's classes and designations on working with buyers. There's classes and designations on working with sellers, also on negotiating. So these might be some places to kind of sharpen your skills. How about Pennsylvania? And then I'll go to closing for now before the class on Tuesday. So in Pennsylvania, we already have standard forms in place, which is a big help, right? This makes life a lot easier for agents and clients doing real estate business in Pennsylvania. So we already have standard forms in place through PAR, the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. And we have, namely the buyer agency agreement, which already spells out the compensation that's expected from the buyer. And it has language saying that we're going to seek this compensation from the listing broker. So it basically says, hey, we expect to get charged X amount, right? Or we expect to collect X amount. Usually we get the compensation from the listing broker, but if that is not present, then the buyer could be responsible for it, right? So there is already language in there in the buyer agency agreement that breaks things down that could be very applicable to how things are changing, and PAR may make some changes as we mentioned. The listing agreement also that we have through PAR already breaks down the compensation. What is the total compensation? What are we giving the buyer agent? What are we giving the sub agent? What are we giving transactional licensees? So the listing agreement and the buyer agency agreement already do, I think, a good job of breaking down the compensation, of solidifying the agency relationship that's in place, right? So, the options and language that we foresee happening, they're already doable with our current forms. Now, there might be some more options to come, and there may be some more updates coming to the forms and MLS changing, right? Last thing I want to leave you with this. I took a little longer than I wanted here. On Tuesday, I'm going to dive deeper into this, having a class about navigating the recent changes in the real estate laws in our industry. I want people to not only adapt, but thrive in this new environment, right? So in this class, we're going to dive deeper into buyer agency agreements and buyer agency work. We're going to dive deeper into working with sellers, right? And we're going to dive deeper into negotiating. We're going to dive deeper into all the skills and processes and steps that agents need to take in order for them to adapt and thrive in this new environment in the midst of the change. So that's going to go live Tuesday, 3/26 at 11 a.m. I'm not broadcasting it here. I'm going to do it on Google Meet. So just comment RSVP or DM me the words RSVP, and I will send that meeting link to you. All right. So 3/26, right? March 26th, Tuesday, 11 a.m. Adapting and thriving, navigating real estate changes, navigating changes in the real estate industry and our industry. That's Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. RSVP in the comment or in a message, and I will send you the meeting link. Doing that on Google Meet. Since I'm on that slide, I'm also holding a few other classes. You can see there on Thursday, my wealth building class, from surviving to thriving, Realtor's Guide to Financial Empowerment and Wealth Building. That's also on Google Meet. So send me a message about that and I'll send you the invite. And on the 3rd of April, we will then have our monthly mastermind. That's where realtors from different brokerages come together, different niches, different markets, come together and share and learn and contribute. We look at what's trends, challenges, tips, skills, and it's a great discussion. It's a very collaborative meeting, and everybody kind of contributes. So that's what's coming up Tuesday, 11 a.m. We're going to talk about navigating these changes more in depth. Thursday, 11 a.m., we're going to talk about financial empowerment and wealth building. And then the 3rd of April, Wednesday, 11 a.m., we'll have our collaborative mastermind. So if you want to attend any of these, send me a message. I'll make sure to send you the invite. None of these will be broadcasted live like this is now. They're going to be in closed Google Meets. So hopefully this was helpful. Feel free to go back and watch it again. And if you have any questions, let me know.